all, if you're gonna make a comic, make it too big. If it's your first comic, don't make a 400-page comic like I'm doing. Please make something smaller. You're gonna save yourself a lot of time and effort. And like I said, not everyone is gonna enjoy the process of making a comic. So it's good if you can figure that out with a 20-page comic or a 50-page comic before you move into hundreds of pages. Also, I think if you're a very small artist, you don't have a whole lot of followers online, so you can't do any cross-platform advertisement. Definitely check out, webcomic archives. There's a lot of Tumblr pages and Twitter pages where you can submit your comic and they will put it in their archives so other people can find it that way. It's not you won't get thousands and thousands of followers from it, but it's nice, It's a good way to promote yourself if you don't have a whole lot of followers. I wish I knew that, early on, but yeah, just have fun.
Hello, my name is Annie, and you are listening to World of Webcomics, a podcast all about interviewing creative people who are telling their stories online. Now, if you've listened to a few of these episodes, or maybe even one or two, you know that I love robots. But you also might not know that I love me some aliens as well. And this creator has just about the most adorable, heartfelt, lovely, beautifully drawn alien comic on the internet. And I had such a lovely time speaking with her, and I will allow her to introduce herself and her comic. Without further ado, let's go to the interview. All right. Well, for those who may not know, could you please introduce yourself as well as what you are known for?
My name is Sara. I go by Niceit online usually, and I do the webcomic Going Home on Webtoon as Hapas.
Excellent. And could you also give us kind of a pitch for the story for those who haven't read it yet?
Yeah. It's a sci-fi story. It's a drama/comedy. It has a lot of LGBTQ characters. It's very much a found family trope kind of story. So yeah, and it's about Nova, who lives on the countryside, and suddenly there's just a bunch of aliens there, and she has to figure out what to do with them. And that's that.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that idea of a found family. I feel like that encompasses it perfectly. As I understand it, this is actually a reboot of an old story. Could you explain that?
So when I was 15, I came up with the first version, sort of. In the beginning, I was I would like to make a cartoon with this or something, but cartoons are expensive and hard, and I don't want to do that. So, I revamped it into a comic, and I did about 2 chapters before I gave up because comics are hard. But a few years later, I wanted to kind of restart it again, and we were actually doing final projects in school. So I thought I would, 2 birds, 1 stone, and reboot the comic then. So yeah, the old one was really bad. So don't try to find it or anything, please. But
what do you feel has been the major difference in this version?
I think I figured out what medium I need to use. The first one, I just did a sketch. I didn't do any line art because I was I'm gonna save time by just drawing the sketch. So I had to make the sketch really good on the first try, so everything looked super stiff. And I also did it traditionally, the lines, and then I just scanned it in and colored it digitally. And it was just, the workflow was horrible. So I shot myself in the foot with that one. So now I just moved to complete digital, and I think that's a lot easier to manage, sort of.
Nice. You mentioned animation, and you actually have a YouTube channel, is that right?
Yeah. I don't do animations per se. It's animatic, so it's easier animation, sort of. It's just fewer frames.
It's kind of like moving storyboards, right?
Exactly.
Is that something that you're hoping to pursue, in the future?
I mean, of course it would be fun, but I'm not really. I don't think I have the passion for animation that I need to have to make it work. I have a twin sister actually. She does animatics as well on YouTube. She's a lot more successful at it than I am.
Oh, very cool. You'll have to give me her info, and I'll link it in the description for when this goes up. Yeah. So I would assume then that your passion lies with comics. So I'd love to hear more about that. Give us a little bit of your backstory. How did you get started with art and then find your way to comics?
Gosh, where to start? I kind of think it began with my dad is a graphic designer. He works with ads and stuff. So he was drawing a lot when I was younger, and I got very inspired by that. But a big part of it was anime and manga. I think that's kind of a universal thing for artists,
of course,
to start out with manga. But yeah, that's where I began. We didn't really have anime in Sweden, where I'm from. We had Dragon Ball and Naruto and stuff in our school library. So that's my origins. I kind of grew out of it pretty fast though. So like it wasn't my entire inspiration, but it kind of kickstarted comics essentially. But like I've been
Yeah.
drawing comics as long as I can remember. I used to do it like back in school during like like class. I would draw comics with myself and like my friends as self inserts and yeah.
Yes, that's awesome. That sounds familiar. I have similar memories. So, something interesting about Going Home is that it is not vertically formatted like a lot of
Yeah.
the comics on Webtoon. But something I think that you do really well, and it's funny to know that your dad has a graphic design background, is that the pages still work really well on mobile. Like I read the whole thing on my phone and it
Yeah.
still read really well. So for you, why did you choose webcomics as opposed to like a traditional print publisher?
Well, first of all, I don't have thousands of dollars laying around so I can get into print. Um, Wish I did, but no, sorry. No, I think it's good because it's very shareable. You don't need to like have a huge following. You don't need to have a ton of money to start. You can just start posting it on Webtoons and Tapas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think the accessibility is a big draw for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that also kind of brings up something else I found interesting, which you mention in one of your artist comments, is the fact that before this, a lot of your work was fan art. And so I
Yeah.
was curious, like for you, what has it meant to have a following around an original story?
It's a whole nother experience. Like I think a lot of people do fan art, especially now with when Instagram and Tumblr and all that is so accessible. I think a lot of people start out with fan art, but I clearly remember when I started my webcomic that the first few comments that came pouring in, those were mind blowing. That people are discussing my characters and my world instead of just appreciate something I drew because they like a certain IP or whatever. So that's an inspiration. That's a confidence boost for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's always really exciting
Yeah.
because you have to like kind of forge your own path with your story, and to have people appreciate your characters is like a special feeling.
Yeah.
And speaking of having like that following for you, do you think that there are any particular pros or cons to publishing on a platform like Tapas or Webtoon?
Okay, let's begin with the cons, I guess. The formatting is ugly. I don't like, the mismatching like colors and shapes and stuff for the like. I know a lot of people use like Tumblr and stuff to post their webcomics because you can kind of decorate it however you want. But I really like Webtoons. I think they share stuff a lot on their page. So it gets a lot of traction. I think I got like my comics were at a few hundred readers, and then Webtoons decided to promote it for a week or something on their canvas page, and I think I boosted, like I got up to like 1,000 followers or something, so that was a huge thing for me. And Webtoons also has a great monetization program. Like I know a lot of people do like the vertical comic thing, right? You scroll down and then that's one chapter. But seeing as I do very small, yeah, like you said, I do very like these shorter page, smaller page formats, which allows me to make a lot of like separate chapters or whatever you call it. And that means I get like a bit more AdSense on each page. So I've actually gotten like, yeah, I think I broke in the system, in
That's
terms of
clever. I
comics.
love that.
Yeah, please don't tell Webtoons. They're gonna ban me. But I managed to make like $100 or $200 each month just from my webcomic, which I think is amazing. And so that's a huge bonus.
Yeah, congrats. I think all of this stuff that empowers the independent creator is like what
Yeah.
excites me about
Yeah.
stuff like Webtoon. I think it's clear, like as I was kind of mentioning before, that you have a love for the page. And sometimes I struggle with that because I personally like cut and paste my traditional pages into vertical format.
Yeah.
But I think the strength of your comic is that I don't know if that would work because you have these cool layouts.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about your process? Like, what's it like from sketch to finished page?
Gosh, I have a very messy process. It's not very streamlined, but I usually start out with a script, as most people do. I have a very, very loose script. Then I move on to thumbnails. and that's where I kind of like flesh out the dialogue and stuff. I come up with a lot of it on the spot, which I mean, it's not a fantastic process. I don't necessarily recommend it, but that's just what works for me. So I make these small like thumbnail sketches just to see, find the layout, whatever works. And I can redo those really fast. So if something like doesn't work properly or looks kind of off, I can redo it very fast, so I don't have to like figure it out later when I move on to the line art or color or whatever. So yeah, then I just kind of paste it into my preferred program of choice. I usually use Paint Tool Sci, unless I have to do any like special effects work, then I use Photoshop. Yeah, then it's just sketch, line art, color. It's pretty much the straightforward.
Do you have a favorite step in the process?
I used to say it was line art because like I could just put on a podcast or a movie or something in the background and just kind of zone out, because line art is just such a mechanical thing. But I don't know, I'm really tired of line art. I kind of dread it now. I just want to draw the fun stuff. So I have to say,
I think it changes, yeah.
Yeah, like it used to be my favorite thing because I didn't have to think. I hate thinking. No, I think color, probably.
I can see that. I love, I'm like jealous of your coloring style. I'm like,
Thank
man,
you.
I need to like do this more graphic look. It's so effective.
Yeah.
Also, do you have a favorite character to draw?
Oof, that was hard. God.
You definitely seem like you have a love for both animation and comics, because these characters they have like really fun cartoony designs for sure.
I actually also get a lot of like, not critique, but people say like, why do you draw like a frame, like a panel several times? And it's usually because I kind of want to get in that movement. I think like there's a lot of subtle things a character can do with their like face or their hands or something to just indicate what they're thinking or feeling. And it's not necessary per se to put it in the page. I think it adds a lot. So I tend to like go that extra mile just to put in those small little movements and stuff, which I think kind of comes from that animation-esque background. But yeah, favorite character, yes. I really like to draw the FBI squad. Like they have a very fun like shape language. Dimitri is very like a lot of triangles and stuff. Franklin is very like round, and they're fun to draw together because they interact so much.
And as I understand it, the fans actually named them. Is that right?
Yeah. Again, like with I mentioned that I have a very like, I do not have a very straightforward way of like writing my comic. And a lot of it is just made up like a couple days before the script is written or the page goes up. So I didn't have a name for the like, not antagonist, but like the FBI squad in my comic. So I just kind of, hey guys, do you want to come up with some fun names for these dudes?
I think that's so fun. Like, again, I just get excited about this kind of stuff because it's like, in what other time would that happen? Like, where fictional characters get named by the people who read those characters.
Again,
that's so cool.
That's why webcomics is so fun. Like, there's a lot of interactivity that can be done. Like, people, they make websites, like they write down a website and put it in the comic as like a website the character goes on, and then they make it in real life and like stuff like that. I think that's fantastic, you know?
Yes, there's like multiple ways to enjoy this story.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Speaking of story, you kind of said you have like a really loose script. I'd love to hear more about, I guess let's start with that. How do you write? Do you have like a detailed outline? Do you know where the story's going to go? How does that work?
It's incredibly messy. When I started the comic, I didn't know how it would end, which is like the number one thing everyone say you shouldn't do. You know, you should plan out your story. But I really, really just wanted to start, and I knew kind of, you know, the story beats. But I have figured it out by now. I know how it will, you know, end and stuff. I have like a Google Doc where I put in like the story bits. I don't write out the dialogue that early, and then I kind of go by that script. It's not like set in stone, and sometimes I decide to like change something like when I'm drawing the page. Which again, it's not a fantastic practice, but that's how I do it. And yeah, and then I kind of figure out the dialogue when I make the thumbnails. Sometimes I figure out the dialogue after the page is finished, because I add in the dialogue pretty much the day I'm supposed to post it. So sometimes, you know, things slips in that like isn't supposed to be in there, because I come up with it on the spot, and then I go back a few days later and I'm like, oh god, what did I add that? Now I have to, it's horrible. I don't recommend it, you know, but
to be honest, it comes as a surprise to know, because your story, like there's a lot of fun character interaction, but there's not a lot of fluff. Like the plot is very like streamlined. So
No, I really tried because I knew the comic was gonna be long, just because of the scope I set. So I'm like, okay, I only put in what's necessary when it comes to story. So, but I tried to put in a little fluff. I kind of contemplated if I was supposed. There's 2-page scene where they just kind of hang out in the middle of the more recent pages, because I was like, I want these guys, like, I want my characters to know each other better in universe, because by that time they had like met 2 days ago or something. For us, it has been like almost 2 years, but for them, it's like 2 days of interaction. And I was like, no, that's not gonna work. So I put in like a little montage of them hanging out.
Yeah, I think what you do really well is those fun character interactions, because it never feels like we just stop the story to just have a fun character interaction. It always feels like it's serving like multiple purposes, which I think is important in writing.
Yeah, like the whole story is supposed to be very character driven. And I just want, like, in a way, it's more. I know the comic is named Going Home, and it's kind of like, I want the general theme to be a bit like, what is home, Is it this house the story is taking place? Is it somewhere in space? But like my thesis is that like home is where your family is, and this is very much like a found family sort of thing. So I feel like they need to mix. The characters need to interact a lot, because that's the backbone of the story. So
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. How do you feel? I mean, like without giving any spoilers, I guess, but how do you feel like the different characters feel about that idea of home? How do they help us as a reader kind of explore that theme?
They are very much like on the spectrum. I think Kevil, for example, has a very clear definition of what home is, and that's his home planet, where he's not currently, but like that's where he wants to go. Well, Andy, he doesn't have a home in the story. Like, he technically has a home planet, and so does Kriya, but neither of them wants to go back to that place per se. So for them, it's more of like a loose definition. The most interesting is probably Nova, because like her okay, I'm not gonna spoil it now, but like things happen to her family and like to her and stuff. So she's kind of lost in that sense. Yeah.
Right.
They have a clear definition on what home is.
Yeah.
And no one of them is there currently, I think.
I like that. And hopefully together they'll find that. I think it's a really heartwarming story. I love that.
Actually, I got like a comment the other day that was like, is this the last chapter of the comic? Because, they're about to go home, so to say. But no, it's not the last chapter. There's quite a bit left. Things are gonna take a turn. But no, I just found that fun, because they're like, yeah, they're going home to their home planet. So they're home now. That's the story, right? And I'm like, yeah.
It's more complicated. Both thematically and plot-wise. So.
Yeah.
So that also kind of prompts me to ask too, like, if you had to kind of give like a fraction or a percentage, where do you think we are like in the story? Is it like the halfway point, or
chapter wise we're halfway, actually? Okay. Like I said, I just only written like very loose story points. I don't have like the actual page count finished, but I think these last chapters are going to be quite a bit longer than the earlier ones. So like chapter wise, like I think there's going to be about 10 chapters or 9 chapters and an epilogue, but these are going to be really long. Nothing is set in stone yet, but we still have a lot of Going Home left, so no one has to worry about that except for me, who has to draw it. But
fair enough. Something else that's interesting about this story, and a lot of clever dialogue, is I don't think it's a secret that there's some social commentary.
Yeah.
Was that intentional? And what are your thoughts on having social commentary within a story like this?
God, like I grew up with like the 2010 cartoon era. I think like Going Home is not a children's story per se, but it's like for a wide audience. And I think just like, the medium of cartoons and comics and stuff are moving into like trying to tell a deeper story, that rather than just like, haha, they're having fun in space. It wasn't intentional per se, but I think I kind of like leaned into it the further I got into the story with like the evil quotation mark guard alien and the other aliens. Yeah, I didn't intend for it to necessarily, but I do like that fact.
Yeah, I think that, or rather I should ask, do you feel like sci-fi as a genre kind of allows us to explore those ideas?
Yeah. I don't have a whole lot of add to that. Yes.
For you, what are some of your favorite aspects of sci-fi?
I like that you can kind of break the mold. If you make a story take place today, like in a normal town with normal everyday characters. You kind of have to keep to the status quo. You need to like make things at least semi-realistic to make it work. With sci-fi, you can just go off the grid. You can say like, yeah, this character just works like this because that's just how the race works. Like a lot of my characters, for example, is LGBTQ, and in some other stories, like if you had a normal slice of life taking place on Earth with human characters and stuff, you kind of have to like necessarily justify them being LGBTQ, but you have to kind of like
perhaps like a point of conflict.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But like when they're aliens, you can be like, yeah, that's just how their society works. No one questions it. It's just they are just gay. So I think that gives a lot of like freedom to tell stories that might be harder to tell in another context.
Yeah, definitely. I think we can see that even in like very early iterations like Star Trek and whatever, and how that's progressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of which, kind of moving more to the visual side of your comic, I love the designs of the aliens. Could you speak to like how you went about creating such a different cast? Everyone's so distinct.
Yeah. I think I kind of have to contribute that to like that first version of Going Home I did a few years ago, because those designs weren't great. Those I'm not gonna show them, but they were, just take my word for it, they were bad. But that kind of allowed me to have like a starting point. Like I know Andy was gonna be a bit like more buff built. I know Kev was gonna be very like thin, and I wanted to make him purple. I kept that, for example, so I could just kind of make a better iteration of characters that already existed, which like helped me a lot. But then it's also, just character design in general. We studied that in school a lot, like the animation principles of making the nice characters should use round shapes, and the evil characters should use pointy shapes. And that helps a lot. Especially like my art is very cartoony, so I can kind of embrace that. If you make a more realistic, if you have a realistic art style, that might be harder. But yeah, that's just trial and error and like using what I know from school.
Yeah. As far as your overall visual art style, do you have any major influences?
I kind of have to like contribute that to 2010's cartoon, like Adventure Time, Gravity Falls, Steven Universe. And a lot of people have drawn comparison between Steven Universe and my comic, which I can see that. I can definitely see that. There's also like aliens and it's cartoony, but that inspired me a ton. I've always drawn cartoony, but I don't think my art would be where it is if it wasn't for like growing up with that kind of media.
Definitely. I would also love to kind of get some of your more insight on things like Patreon. How has that worked for you? And is that a lot of extra work? Because you have like physical rewards.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I don't actually like, one of my patron tiers is like sharing my art to like off the characters and stuff to my patrons. And the thing is, I don't really draw my characters a whole lot outside of the comic, which sounds weird, but like really feel like drawing them outside of the comic. So sometimes I feel like I'm not like, I have to force myself to make art that I might not really want to draw. But like, it's my characters. It's not too bad, and then maybe just will change that tier down the line. But I think the best tier is definitely the see my comic page a week early, because that's extremely easy to just keep up. You just need to have a good buffer, just give them a page early. But the physical rewards, I find those the most fun, actually. I have done a few like conventions and stuff here in Sweden, so I know how to make pins, I know how to make prints and stickers and stuff, so it's kind of make a few of those. The hardest part is getting them shipped out. Kind of expensive shipping to the United States. The process itself is actually kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of us are not able to attend conventions now.
No. Yes.
But, I'd love to know, regardless, if someone has never done a convention before, what would be your tips?
Draw anime.
Really? That's it?
Yeah. I think you need to kind of know what convention will work for you. Me and my sister both draw like very cartoony stuff, and we usually table together. And like a lot of convention is very anime geared, Comic-Con is like a lot of anime work. There's actually a really fun festival here in Sweden. It's called the International Comic Festival. It's just basically a whole lot of fanzines and stuff like that. So that's our crowd. We sell really well there. But I think know the market. Know like if your art style fits into the comic convention scene, or if you maybe need to like adjust your art style, or maybe think if opening an online store would be better. But yeah, I've only done it for a few years. There's probably better people you can ask for advice.
No, that's good to know. I think knowing the market is always good advice in general.
Yeah.
And as far as that audience pertaining to your comic, what tips have you felt have succeeded in gaining an audience for Going Home? what would be your tips there?
I think I've had a bit of a following on other social media. You know, I've had Tumblr for a lot of years, so my following there is pretty decent. So I think just my art style for my webcomic and my art style on my other social media is very similar. I don't like adjust my art style to make my webcomic or something like that. So I think just if people enjoy my work on other social media sites, they usually like going home. Yeah, even if I draw fan art and stuff on my Tumblr, there's always like my style of, you know, storytelling when I draw fan art or fan comics, etc. So it's just like if they like your other stuff, they'll probably like your webcomics. So then you can just kind of, you know, boost your webcomic on your Tumblr or Instagram or Twitter or whatever. That helped me hugely, you know, just sharing that fan base for my comic as well as my other art.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is to our advantage to use all of our tools, like all the various social media.
Yeah.
With that, though, it sounds like a lot of work. How do you manage your time?
I don't. No, but it's a balancing act, definitely. The thing is, like, I think I had a bit of an advantage because, like, going home started out as a school project, technically speaking. Like, it was my final work. Like, the first 2 chapters of Going Home was, like, my final project. In high school, I think that's the equivalent. So that, like, I got a few hours, like, every week to just, like, work on my final project. So then I could put all of that into Going Home. And that, like, really helped me set a schedule, you know? I get home from school, I draw an hour of comic every day, and then I, you know, that becomes routine. So if you have the self-discipline, force yourself to draw like an hour of comic when you get home from school or work or whatever. If you can like make sure, if you do that every day for like 2 weeks, that's gonna become a habit, and from there it's you just draw. You don't have to think about it anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like working a muscle. It's like it's just building over time.
Yeah, and then you can just you can schedule everything else out, like outside of, like, you know, you have the comic time, you know, 1 hour after work. Then you can plan in stuff with friends and work stuff or whatever. But yeah, no, that's just kind of my way. I'm not sure if it's necessarily healthy, but
That's another thing I always like to ask people is about work-life balance, and
yeah,
is self-care something that you prioritize, and if so, how?
I should. But I can't say I'm necessarily like I have. It's really good for me because I only work like part time right now because I'm trying to get into a school. So I work on a portfolio as well as doing like commissions and stuff, doing comics, and then like working part time. So I do get a lot of extra time. So I can kind of squeeze in, you know, days when maybe I don't want to draw and maybe I just play video games that day. I know not like everyone could keep up like with 2 pages a week or something with their limited time, but that's kind of my saving grace. We'll see how it goes once I go to school, you know, if I can survive that. But right now that helps a lot.
Yeah. What are your video game recommendations? Now I'm curious.
Ooh. All right. Jeez. I really like one of my favorite games are Lisa the Painful. It's an indie game. It's made in like RPG Maker. It's so like I love games with good storytelling, and I love games that can be both serious and like really goofy at the same time. And that's definitely one of those games. My favorite game of all time is Team Fortress 2. That's where I began like my video game career. That's where I'm gonna stay forever.
I can see that the kind of cartoony style, the dynamic
Yeah.
character interactions. Yeah.
I
can see
think
that.
I think cartoony stuff. I will always gravitate towards that. So if a video game has fun art style, then I'm like, I play.
I like how you mentioned the storytelling too. This is something I've been thinking about, how video games kind of have the potential to be like the ultimate storytelling because they're so immersive. How do you feel
Yeah.
like that comics compare to something like a regular book versus a movie? Like, do you think that comics have any particular advantages as a form of storytelling?
I think comic be considered like the middle ground between video games and like a normal book, because comics, like, okay, listen, I haven't read Homestuck, but from what I've heard, it's like they have a lot of interactivity in their in the comic. You know, in the beginning you have to like they ask the audience stuff and etc etc. I haven't read Homestuck, so please, no one listening to this, please don't hate me, but I think it's great that you know the comments and stuff like that's interactivity on its own. And I think the fact, like, you know, if you publish a book in real life, you have to like make 200 pages and then, you know, get it out there, and then people can start like giving you feedback and etc etc. When you have a webcomic, you can post 1 page, people can give you feedback on that, and then you can like better yourself for the next page. And I think that's great. I think that will just, you know, make comics the best it can be, because there will always be, you can improve gradually instead of having to like improve in terms of like make 1 book, it's bad, make another book like another 2 years later and it's a little bit better, you know.
Yeah, in that case, the more instant feedback kind of allows you to get better faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think it sounds like your audience is a really positive, especially like with fun stuff like being able to name some characters and
Yeah.
everything? Do you think that having that instant feedback could possibly be a negative thing for creators?
I think it kind of depends on like the audience you surround yourself with. I think I'm really grateful. I have like really, really nice, polite, like fun fans. But I mean, I also tell a story that's like very not like it's not for kids necessarily, but like it's like for all audiences, etc. I think if you tell a story that's a bit more controversial or like a bit like more adult, you could get an audience that might be more critical or like more like divided on things in the comics, which makes discourse, etc., etc. So yeah, and if you do get the bad critique, that can kill a comic.
That's
There's
true. I guess in what way? How do you feel it could kill it?
Comics are such a like a passion project. I think you need to love making comics to make comics, because you have to put in so many hours and get like very little like in return. Yes, you get comments and stuff, but like it's not something you can live off easily. So if you get a lot of negative feedback, like if comments are the only thing that really helps you going with a comic, then getting only negative comments will probably kill the comic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the fact that we do create things to be read. So
Yeah.
it's nice to have people read it, but at the same time like your motivation has to be from you. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think everyone is made to make comics. I think there's people who has fantastic stories to tell and like have really great characters and stuff, but maybe don't have the drive to make a comic. And that's okay. Like you can make other media, you can make a book or something. But comics are very, very like labor intensive. And if you don't like every single step in the process, it will be a lot harder for you. Like if you don't like drawing, or if you don't like, writing like a comprehensive story, then comics might be like more work than it's worth.
Yeah. Like you were saying, while at high school, like coming home and having that desire to work on your comic
Yeah.
for like an hour a day. Like I think that's pretty indicative of the fact that it's like
Yeah.
something you like and you're willing to put in the work for.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would also love to hear your thoughts on, since it is a sci-fi comic, world building. So that's a big topic within the creative world. What would be your tips for how to execute that kind of thing well?
Oh, that's hard. Seeing as my comic is a sci-fi, I think I get away with a lot of things. I don't have to explain every single thing, because like a sci-fi universe is so vast. Like people kind of have to like fill in some gaps themselves. But I just remember like, okay, so again, I read a lot of manga when I was little, and I remember like the creator of Dragon Ball. He enjoyed making his own universe because you could break the rules. You could like come up with whatever you want, and it's like factual to the universe. You don't have to do any research. So that's just kind of I make up my own rules for this universe as I go. So if I'm like, yeah, all the aliens can speak with each other without problem, then that's just how it is. And I think that really helps me in the story writing process. But no, but I think my comic world is kind of just like our world plus aliens. So the Earth part is just Earth, so that's not a whole lot of world building there. And we haven't really gotten to the space stuff yet, so I have not been worrying about that too much. I'll handle that once I get there.
I like that. The other thing is that I just love Kriya so much. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on like writing character arcs and like your experience with that.
Yeah, no, the thing is, like, I don't have any real prior experience. Like, this is the first proper comic I make. So, like, all these characters, like, I had that first, like, test run of this comic, but, it didn't go very far, etc. So this is, like, the first try. This is my first try with these characters. But I just really love the villain to, like, friend to lover development. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. And then I just did. And that's how I got here. I didn't worry too much about it. Like everything about my comic is just made on the spot. It looks very like it's very thought through and everything is planned. No, it's not. I just write and then and then it just turns out okay.
Interesting. Okay. I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit, but okay.
A little planning, but like.
Well, good to know. Well, I have loved hearing your insight. Before we wrap up here, I'd love to hear just your parting thoughts and advice for people who are trying to do the same thing. What would you say to an aspiring comic artist?
Whoa, that's a big question. There's a lot of things to think about, but okay, here's a few tips. First of all, if you're gonna make a comic, make it too big. If it's your first comic, don't make a 400-page comic like I'm doing. Please make something smaller. You're gonna save yourself a lot of like time and effort. And like I said, like not everyone is gonna enjoy the process of making a comic. So it's good if you can figure that out, like with a 20-page comic or a 50-page comic before you move into hundreds of pages. Also, like I think if you're like a very small artist, you don't have like a whole lot of followers online, so you can't like do any cross-platform advertisement. Definitely check out, webcomic archives. There's a lot of like Tumblr pages and Twitter pages where you can like submit your comic and they will put it in their archives so other people can find it that way. It's not like you won't get thousands and thousands of followers from it, but it's nice, It's a good way to promote yourself if you don't have a whole lot of followers. I wish I knew that, like, early on, but yeah, just have fun.
Yeah, that's really good, like, practical advice. I like that.
Don't force yourself to make a comic if you don't want to, make something that you can enjoy drawing. If you can't make 4 pages of full color comics every week, then don't. It's not a race. It's not. You're not the worst artist because you don't draw thousands of pages full color painted semi-realism. If you just want to make like a sketches that you put into your own comic, then do that because you're gonna enjoy it a lot more, and that will show. If you enjoy making your comic, it will show in the pages. Yeah, that's. I think that's all I have to add.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that. I know you're focusing on this, of course, but can we expect more comic projects from you in the future?
Yeah, actually, I'm currently working on a very short form comic project because I have to, like I said, I'm trying to get into a school right now, and it's a school for comic work, for graphic storytelling. So I have to make a few like smaller comics, and I will definitely share those when I'm done with those. So long form, but a little something.
Yeah, very cool, and good luck with all of that. I'm sure you'll do well.
Thank you.
If people want to find you on social media, where would they do so?
I go by Niceit on almost all platforms. I go by Sara Niceit on Instagram, and I go by Niceit with 2 T's at the end on Twitter. Just search for Niceit and you will find my stuff.
Awesome. Well, I will have that all linked below when I post this. And thank you again so much. I loved this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. So nice of you.
Thank you again to Sara for giving me her time and her thoughts. I loved hearing about the process and all those lovable characters. Going Home is such a fun, heartfelt story. I really recommend checking it out. Definitely check out her social media as well. All links will be in the description below. A link to my editor's Instagram is also in the description below. Zoe has a beautiful art style, and she is doing an awesome job with helping me get these episodes out. I really appreciate her help. If you're at all interested in checking out my work, my Instagram, Twitter, and my comic, Soul Match is something that you can read on Webtoon, and I also have linked below. If you have a comic, let me know the title. I'm still getting around to reading all of them, but I promise I do really want to read all of them. I'm just slow, y'all. But please also leave your recommendations, anything else that you would like for me to check out, whether that's to interview someone or just something you think I would enjoy reading. Let's support each other in this webcomic world. Until next time, guys. Bye.